Hey, it's Tom Jordan. Can you believe it? We're a day out, less than 24 hours, really, till the beginning of the official election day. So, as you can imagine, we got some big issues that we are going to deal with today. But before we get to all of that, I thought we'd start with another great campaign slogan just developed over the weekend from none other than President Joe Biden.
There's one more thing Trump and his Republican friends want to do. They want another giant tax cut for the wealthy. Now, I know some of you guys are tempted to think it's macho guys. I'll tell you what, man. When I was in Scranton, we used to have a little trouble going down the plot once in a while. For green reasons. But I'm serious. These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
Yeah, you think so? You think so? What is he doing there? I mean, President Joe Biden, he wants to smack Republicans because Republicans want to give people tax cuts. Nice fellow, isn't he? And people cheer for him and they laugh at that kind of stuff. And, calling for violence essentially. I mean, that's what hitting somebody is, smacking them. Unless the government can continue to rake Americans over the coals with tax hikes on middle income earners, by the way. These aren't billionaires only that are getting tax hikes. It's the middle income earners. That defines me. I am a middle income earner, and definitely my taxes will go up with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. So anyway, it's amazing when you hear comments like that from this guy who's campaigning for Kamala Harris, and he does this kind of stuff. That is such a nail biter in this race, just under 24 hours until Election Day. And the latest polls are revealing a really tight race between the former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris, who, by the way, does want to raise your taxes on middle-income earners. But especially if you look at these key, these 7 key battleground states that we've been watching, we will continue to watch. And according to this poll that came out over the weekend, New York Times, Siena College surveys, Trump is pulling ahead, yes, in the state of Arizona. The numbers there are 49 to 45% in the state of Arizona for Donald Trump. But look at Kamala Harris. She has the edge in Nevada and in Wisconsin and in North Carolina and in Georgia right now. The candidates are tied in Pennsylvania and in Michigan, which are crucial states, obviously, two of the most consequential states this particular election cycle will be Pennsylvania and the state of Michigan, kind of considered must-win states. But 11% of voters still, the day now before Election Day, are still undecided or persuadable, is the way they put it. The last-minute campaign efforts could tip the scales either way. And I do wonder if that's a real number. Are they really persuadable? Are they really undecided? Or are they just not spilling the beans on who they would prefer to vote for? I mean, I feel like at this point, everyone's kind of made up their mind, but maybe there's a few who have not yet, and they're listening to all this ridiculous comments. Debbie Dingell, Congresswoman out of Michigan, she came out over the weekend and was on Fox News with, I think it was Friday or was it Saturday, where she came out and said to Fox News and doubled down that Donald Trump has a plan to put in Muslims and Arabs and his political opponents in internment camps. And the anchor said to her, "You can't possibly believe this." She goes, "Absolutely, I do." And she doubled down on it. And then she kind of says she's a little half kidding in terms of the internment camps themselves. But come on, this is some of the most lunatic kind of behavior and rhetoric. And people believe this. People say, "Oh, nobody believes it." They do. They actually believe Donald Trump is going to be an authoritarian when he's fighting the exact opposite. Anyway, the surveys that have come out, despite all of this negative, these connotations about, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris as well, it's a reflection of a significant focus. I believe what really matters is the economy. And some people still think abortion is in this battle. I think legally abortion is in most states now the law of the land. There's an effort now from groups like Right to Life, Michigan, and others that are really in the effort now to change hearts and minds because in many cases the laws have already been established. And the laws right now are not up for grabs unless the Democrats win, and then they will put a federal law in place that allows abortion for all 9 months of pregnancy. That's what they will do. If the Republicans win, they're backing off and letting the states decide as it is right now. But still, abortion is a strong message for Democrats. They're still putting it out there as if that is at risk if Republicans win. Don't get me wrong. I can't stand abortion. I think it is evil. But nonetheless, it's not the issue for Republicans this presidential election year cycle. Immigration is. Economy, immigration, top issues. Those are the things that are driving votes. Younger voters, like black voters and Latino voters, they appear less enthusiastic for Kamala Harris compared to Joe Biden's support back in 2020. So that gives Donald Trump's team some hope for a last-minute momentum boost among those 11% who are allegedly undecided. The Senate races as well, very intense, with Democrats' leads in some of these battleground states shrinking in Pennsylvania and in Wisconsin, and in Michigan's got an open seat. The contest there between Mike Rogers and Alyssa Slotkin, very, very close there. And both parties are making a final push to energize their bases as the clock ticks down to Election Day. There may have been about 50% of all registered voters who have already cast their ballot because of early elections and whatnot, but there's still another huge chunk of Americans who have yet to do that. So tomorrow's the day. So here's the issue. There's an overwhelming flood of disinformation. I already mentioned Debbie Dingell in the Kamala Harris comments about, grossly mischaracterizing, frankly lying about Donald Trump. But it's also within, my next guest will talk about this, within even some plants have been put in the Republican Party. This disinformation targeting American voters, flooding disinformation, the media and whatnot. Just a day now before this major election, it's psyops, psychological operations. And the heart of these psyops is to create confusion and apathy, ultimately discouraging people from voting by promoting this narrative that, all is already lost. It's a tactic. We saw it work in the past. 2022, the midterms, there was a heavily touted red wave. And what happened? It was reduced to a trickle, largely because of the sense of defeatism in the ranks of the Republican Party. So my guest today is Scott McMahon. He's been researching how manipulation through various narratives have only wrought confusion about what's true and what's false. And he says to stay focused in this, stay informed, and don't let the noise keep you home. Show up to vote. And if you haven't voted early, make sure you vote tomorrow and you encourage other people to do the same. All right, so that's coming up in a few seconds. We'll get to Scott in just a moment here. I want to remind you, tomorrow is Election Day. We've got a big event here, Tom Jordan Live. It's a special election night watch party at Tom Jordan Live headquarters in Brighton, Michigan, Metro Detroit. We'll broadcast for 4 hours straight, November 5th, tomorrow, from 8 p.m. until midnight, watching the returns come in from around the country as the polls will be closing. So you could be here with me and the staff and the crew here in downtown Brighton, Michigan. It's Speakeasy Studios. You'll see the placard outside of our studios here. You can go to tomjordanlive.com, get more information. You can get the address, I believe, there as well. And if not, go to wayneradio.com. But tomjordanlive.com should have all the information. There'll be drinks and there'll be food that will be provided for you as well. Also, just a reminder as you're watching this, chime in, comment, ask questions in the comment section. And I'll get to those in a moment. Also, if you want to ask Scott any questions, chime in, ask him those questions directly, and we'll get to those together, he and I. Also, the best way you can help Tom Jordan Live is simply to subscribe, watch the videos, share them, and click that notification bell. All right, with the upcoming election just hours away now, experts are warning that a coordinated psychological operation, or a PSYOP, has been aiming to discourage voters, particularly Donald Trump supporters, from heading to the polls. Through these disinformation campaigns, and these psyops are creating confusion, a lot of distrust, and a lot of fatigue. You might have felt that by flooding social media with, conflicting messages. And the goal here is to make people believe that their votes are not going to count, that the system is already rigged, leading them to stay home on Election Day. And there's a lot of people who believe that. And Donald Trump Jr., he's been warning about this as well. He advised, and Scott McMahon pointed this out, we'll ask him about it, but he said that Donald Trump Jr. said, listen, voters need to assume everything they see online might be part of a tactic to dissuade them from voting. Let's get to this. with Scott McMahon. He writes for Bigger Truth Media. The website is biggertruthmedia.com. Check it out. It's very, very interesting what he's writing there, what he's proposing by months and months and months of deep research that he's done. Scott McMahon, I believe he is there. Correct, Cameron? All right, we got him. There he is. I know that mug. Good to see you,
Hey,
Scott.
Tom, how's it going?
Hey, good to see you. Hey, I want you to start
Good.
off with something actually that you wrote yesterday. Well, at least it came out yesterday on Sunday, that mainstream media, including CNN and the New York Times, they have now jumped into this coordinated frenzy, tying General Michael Flynn's rhetoric, which we'll get into him in a little bit, but tying that rhetoric of General Michael Flynn directly to Donald Trump in this bid that they're putting out there to spook moderate Republicans and independents from voting for Donald Trump or even going out to the polls. Can you summarize what you put out there yesterday? I thought it was fascinating, very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Tom. I really appreciate it.
You got it.
Um, so, so I've been tracking. For me, it started by looking at the causes of division within the Michigan Republican Party and in other state parties across the country, and what I found is that there were connections, that it was an insurgency. I mean, we had people coming into the party that were being led and misled by lieutenants within an organization, an insurgency organization that was all linked to General Michael Flynn and to people in his orbit. And the America Project is an organization that he started with Patrick Byrne, a very well funded project, and a lot of those funds ended up with organizations within state parties that have had the goal of taking over the party, and kicking out all the rhinos. But the people that they're kicking out are not rhinos; they are the most talented and hardworking volunteers within the party, and they create chaos and confusion and all kinds of stuff. And that's what they're doing from the outside on against Trump's campaign. And they also they've been putting forward narratives. The Flynn, I call it the Flynn Network. And it's an organization of people. They have many independent podcasters on the right. They have a whole media organization that's structured similarly, actually, to the mainstream media, and they are uh, putting out narratives and messages designed at causing Americans to feel hopeless and despair and angry and to dehumanize their not just political opponents on the left, but even on the right. And and Ivan Raiklin is a key aspect of this. He's been calling for citizen armed live streamed swatting raids of his deep state target list, which includes federal judges. And this is highly illegal stuff. It's incitement. And I've been warning for months that what they're trying to do is to incite kind of a national J6 kind of thing, like a large scale J6 that will cause people um, to get in jail and to die and really really bad stuff, but ultimately I
So they're
think
like planting the bait here, is what it sounds like. And I want to keep this narrative going here, but before we do, I want people to understand who you are, because
sure.
you're not a never Trumper. In fact, you're the opposite, right? You do support Donald Trump, and I guess what's confusing
Absolutely.
is that a lot of people, you're saying here that Michael Flynn does not speak for MAGA, and he does not speak for Donald Trump, nor does Roger Stone, and all these well-known
Mhm.
figures that everyone believes, most people do believe that they're part of Donald Trump's inner circle. So
Right.
why is it that you believe that Michael Flynn and the Roger Stones, that they don't speak for Donald Trump, because most people think that they do?
Right. Well, it is very, very clear that Trump has very much distanced himself from Flynn, Roger Stone, Patrick Byrne. Those people are not allowed in his direct orbit. Now, Trump does send Eric Trump, his sons, Eric and Don Jr., to the Reawaken Tour events and stuff like that. But my view on that is, in part, that Trump is running an intelligence operation against them. He's trying to keep tabs on them. It's kind of the adage: keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Mhm. Hmm.
But Trump himself does not appear at those events. A year and a half ago, Flynn was speaking at an event that had nothing to do with Trump, but he often goes to Mar-a-Lago and rents out space at Mar-a-Lago to make it appear that he's close to Trump. But anybody can do that. Anybody with the money can go and do that. It's a resort, you know, and so he was at an event like that, and Trump actually kind of came on the stage and he said famously, they replay it all the time. The Flynn Network replays it all the time, where he says, "You're a great man, and we're bringing you back." But that was a year and a half ago, and I, I I have a lot of reasons to believe that, and partly because Flynn never goes to Trump's events. You do not see him at Trump's events. He was not at the national convention, and I don't believe that he was invited. I believe he was specifically told not to come. Flynn was, and one of the things I reported on before the national convention is Flynn that
Oh, I think
through this
there we go.
organization.
Sorry, we disconnected for a moment there. Continue on. You
Yeah,
started right after the he was not invited to the convention, and then pick up from there.
yeah. So he was not invited to apologize. I'm doing this on my phone impromptu. I have a feeling after that thing went viral, because I do. Oh man, this is really, I
That's
apologize.
okay. We're good. We're a podcast,
I
so
have
we
a
can
really good setup here
we'll
for
roll with it.
podcasting. Great, I have great service and everything else, but it's like my computer's been attacked and I'm not able to use my computer right now. So
Oh
I
no. All right. Sorry
apologize.
about that. You actually look better now. You look clear right now. So your
Okay, good.
computer's not working. So well, we see you. You look clear, and we can hear you just
Great.
fine. So
Yeah,
yeah,
so I'm doing it for
continue
my
on.
phone, and my phone, so as my phone rings, that kind of blacks me out. Anyways, I apologize.
No.
So at the lead up to the national convention, I reported on in Arizona there was a training session that was held by the insurgents that are close to Patrick Byrne and Mike Flynn in Arizona for the national delegates. And I reported on this. I got screenshots. I was given. I had people, sources in that meeting, that told me about what was happening at the meeting. They were planning on. They were teaching their people how to suspend the rules from the convention floor for the national convention and place a new candidate into nomination. And
Mm.
that really only made sense. That whole thing only made sense if Trump was not going to be there, because Trump had all of the momentum, right? I mean, he won the primaries in a landslide. There was no they were claiming that this was to protect Trump from the uh from the establishment, that they were going to try to put Nikki Haley in. I had sources all over the RNC. There was no state that was going to try to do that, and I knew that for a fact. And from sources, I called even Vermont. I have a source in Vermont in the Vermont GOP, and he said that that's the only state that elected in the primary, that elected Nikki Haley, and they said no, we're not we're not doing this. This is ridiculous. It's crazy. So it really only made sense in the event that Trump, had been assassinated 2 days before the national convention started. Had that happened, Flynn had put himself. He had worked for the last 3 years through his whole organization to put himself in position to take over the national convention from the floor, and it would have been I believe it would have been either a Flynn Haley ticket or a Haley Flynn ticket that would have been presented as a unification of the establishment and the grassroots. And here's the ticket of unity, and healing or whatever. But really, it would have been just the ticket of the military industrial complex, and it would have resulted in World War III.
Okay. Well, that makes so so you believe General Michael Flynn's motive in this is to become president, is what you're saying.
I I don't know, what his inner thoughts are, but I do believe, clearly, just looking at his actions over the last 8 years, starting even when the FBI had a code name for Flynn during Crossfire Hurricane, which was the Russia operation against Trump. Their code name for him was Crossfire Razor. Almost all of Trump's connections at that time in 2016 came through Flynn. And it was, Flynn ended up getting fired as after 23 days as the national security advisor by Trump in part for lying to Pence and not telling Trump about a call that he made with the Russian ambassador after Trump was elected and before he became the president.
But
And
see that
uh,
call though, this is what confuses me because Michael Flynn, because of that call that he made to the Russian ambassador in that time of transition, he
mm,
suffered greatly for it. It was the Democrats who were really going, or the Department of Justice under the swamp, if you want to call it that, that went after him and pretty much ruined his life for a long time. And the threats of imprisonment and financially he was taken out. And it seemed to me and to all of us who were watching it that it was because of his support for Donald Trump that he went through that. And this is where there's some
mm,
disconnect that people have. I know you've done months and months of research. What because you were in
right.
this too. I mean, you said that early on. You were. I mean, at the beginning of this year, I believe that you were all
Mm.
in on Michael Flynn. You were all in on Roger Stone and these others as well. What was it that caused you to say no? These guys are actually not MAGA. They're against Donald Trump. What was it where, in your mind, the lights went on and it woke you up to this reality?
I've got whistleblowers and sources all over the country, and I've really been looking at 2020 in particular, and what happened after the 2020 election, and I've also really been looking at state parties and what happens in state parties, and how hardworking volunteers. I can't even tell you how many hardworking volunteers who have given their life to the party to try to help Republicans get elected, who have come to me in tears over the way that their lives had actually been ruined. I would not say in any by any stretch. I know that Flynn he promotes this victim story that his life was ruined by all this, but was it? He never spent a day in prison, and he is now extremely wealthy. He has paid $75,000 per Reawaken Tour event. He has all of these grifts. They made the America Project, by one account. It's an obscure organization. It's a 501(c)(4), so you can't get their financials. But Patrick Byrne made a statement in 2021 that they had raised $50 million,
Hmm.
and it from they have access to apparently unlimited funds, and they've taken tons of funds from hardworking Americans, supposedly to try to save the country with election integrity. But you can't name a single thing that they have done that has actually improved election integrity. And I don't see where Flynn's life was ruined by this. That's his story. That's what he puts forward. But uh, you know, he actually did much more harm to this country and to Trump and his when what he did in trying when he called the Russian ambassador is he was trying to, and this is a man who has spent 33 years in the military at the highest levels of the military. He was Obama's director of the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Administration. And so he understands chain of command better than just about anyone, right? And he's working for the incoming president of the United States. And he calls on his government issued BlackBerry that he knows the FBI is listening to. He calls the Russian ambassador and contradicts the sitting president's foreign policy with Russia. He's trying to contradict that foreign policy, and he does it. He doesn't tell Trump about it. He lies to Pence about it. He lies to the FBI twice about it.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, you don't do that in that position unless you want to try to cause harm. I just don't see. And that's one data point among so many others. And seeing the ways that they have Stacey Burke, for example, is her story. She's in Arizona. Her story is complex and wild, but she has. They tried to use her. She actually tried to expose Flynn and his connection with Zaid, who is the architect um, of the impeachment against Trump. He was the attorney that represent the impeachment whistleblower. He set up a
Hmm.
fund for the impeachment whistleblower months before the Ukraine call ever happened. And she was exposing to Trump, and she actually got a call into the West Wing to somebody that was in the West Wing at the time to warn Trump that Flynn has very close associations with Mark Zaid, who was trying to take him out at that time. This was 2019. Immediately, the apparatus of the government went about trying to destroy her life, and they tried to use they actually it's a very long and crazy story, but there were 70 different people after the 2020 election that were running psyops on her, trying to get her to sign an affidavit that there was a plane full of ballots from Korea that
Hmm.
landed in Arizona, and this is part of what they were doing, trying to create false evidence of election fraud to deceive Trump and to deceive all of us, and to promote the whole big lie narrative. Because
So,
then
so
we can
let's
see
get to
all of
that for a
these
second.
lies and say, "Oh, it's all a bit."
But so here's my take on the whole election fraud issue, and I think it's an important take, obviously, because it's mine. So that's my belief on this. But you look at there was a very interesting column that was written in the Detroit News. Sometimes I like what their editorial staff writes. I don't like a lot of the reporters now because I think they're all in it, as an affiliate of Washington Post. For Kamala Harris and against Donald Trump. But the editorial staff, I like these two that are leading that aspect of the Detroit News. And Nolan Finley is one of them. Caitlin Buss is the other. Nolan Finley wrote the fact that, listen, of all the people who do not trust this election right now, it is really because of what the Democrats have done to loosen up the laws. And he was writing specifically about Jocelyn Benson, how she has purposely made it much easier to cheat and to commit fraud if you would like to do so. It's like an invitation. You don't need an ID. We're not going to check your signature. We're not going to verify it's the real deal. You can sign these affidavits claiming you are who you are, no questions asked. And then on top of that, once your ballot goes in, even if we do find out that you are fraudulent, that you're not a registered voter or you're not a citizen, it doesn't matter because it's too late anyway, because we can't match the vote that you just cast to anybody's name because it's anonymous. So it seems to me that the system is set up to rig and no
Mhm.
questions asked, And so I look at what the Democrats alone have done over the past several years to institute those policies. So how much of
Right.
that do you think plays into the idea that people don't trust these elections versus what, Michael Flynn or Roger Stone have said?
Well, so much of it is what you do with a story, right? So I do believe that there's election fraud. I completely agree with what you just said about the our Michigan state election laws and the actions of Jocelyn Benson. Our QVF, which is the qualified voter file, this is the data that is balanced against the tabulator counts. And if they don't balance, technically that election is not certifiable. But this
Right.
QVF file is so deeply flawed. Clerks are saying that if you when they're entering voters into their system, into their software, if they don't restart their software, shut it down and restart it between every single data entry, it sends bad data to the state QVF file.
Huh.
And that has been the case throughout her tenure, and she's allowed that to go on. She is, in my view, she is disqualified from office. I think what she has done is at best gross negligence, and possibly it is systemic election fraud that she's engaged in.
Right.
So there is a serious problem, and
Yes.
and we don't know if it is. I mean, it could possibly just be this terrible, this terrible software, which is gross negligence. I think she should be prosecuted for that, or or it is much worse than that. I mean, it could be that there is. That they're building up a body of voters that they know aren't going to vote, that they're going to vote on their behalf. It's possible.
Hmm.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. Even if that's the case, and that may be true, and I just it's almost like a perfect crime because it's extremely hard to prove. And if that is the case, there's still a limited number of votes that can be stolen. And what the Flynn Network does with their narratives about election fraud is they use it to incite hopelessness. They
Hmm.
say it's all rigged. They talk about what I call the machine fraud psyop. Now there are vulnerabilities in the machines and especially in the servers. There are vulnerabilities, yes, but vulnerabilities do not equal fraud. And what they put forward is the belief that it's all rigged, it's hopelessly rigged. If you believe that machines can flip infinite number of votes, then truly what is the point of voting? There is no point because they can just steal unlimited number of votes. But because it's more likely that it's ballot fraud, ballot harvesting, and and that there was a ballot for every vote. I mean, every hand recount that has been done since 2020 has shown that has affirmed, for the most part, the tabulator count. And so if there's a ballot for every vote, what that means is that there's a limited number of ballots that they could steal. So even if you believe that there is election fraud, your vote still is really important. And Trump is totally right when he says we can be too big to rig.
Yes.
And and
So
and,
that's
and
your larger
so
point here. Make sure you get out there because, as you've touched on,
absolutely.
fear and anger. I mean, these are some of the two of the most potent, motivators to get people to prevent them from going out and casting their ballot. And it's often stoked by these exaggerated claims or looming threats of injustice. To me, when I see these exaggerated claims of looming threats and injustices, I still point to the Democrats. I mentioned Debbie Dingell off the top here, that she was coming out saying that if Trump wins, he's going to put his political opponents and Arabs and Muslims in internment camps. And she knows that how? Was she briefed by the director of national intelligence? Did the CIA bring this to her? Or was it simply Kamala Harris who told her these things? But this is what the media globs onto, the CNNs and the MSNBCs, and they exacerbate these lies. I do believe they're flat out lies. There's no intelligence that shows that Donald Trump is going to build these internment camps for political opponents and Arabs and Muslims. That doesn't exist. And if it does, you should just tell us where that exists. To me, that kind of fear and anger being stoked from the Democrats, and I'm not saying it's not happening to the Republicans. Actually, I like a lot of what you say here because I've seen it myself. I've seen Republicans call out other Republicans that they classify as rhinos, who I know personally are very strong conservatives. And they stand strongly and boldly for conservatism and conservative values, but they're being told they're not. And we did see that a lot in 2022 and right after 2020 as well. So I'm not discounting what you're saying here, Scott. I think you're saying a lot
Good.
of things, but I really, and I think it's fascinating. The more I just learned of you about what you're doing about 3 weeks ago, and I was at an event in Oakland County, and a guy we both know brought you up. BiggerTruthMedia.com. People should read it. It's very intriguing, and I want people to understand who you are because I love what you say. It's not about you. It's about the research that you have done. And you're a born again Christian. You believe in Jesus Christ, and you're a supporter of Donald Trump, and you say you're MAGA. And this is not an effort to discount Donald Trump. It's an effort to warn like-minded individuals that they might be being deceived. So you were up in Lapeer, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, good. I
Yeah.
love it. I think you're one of those good, strong journalists who are like actually trying to look at data, and you're willing to be, you're willing to allow your mind to be changed based on fact and data. Do you feel like most
Absolutely.
people nowadays are not, even if the data is right in front of their face, that they won't consider it no matter what because they're so ideologically opposed to that information?
Yeah, I think that, I named my business Bigger Truth because I can't own the truth. There's a bigger truth than what I can even see. And I think that's the case for all of us. But as a journalist, it's fairly easy to be honest, but it's much more difficult to be truthful because there's so much that we can't see. And we all as Americans, especially right now, we are in an information war. And we see that as you were just describing from the left, what the Democrats are doing and the false narratives that they're putting out. But that's happening on our side as well. The media on the right does the same thing, not just to us, not just to the Democrats, not just putting out narratives that might be false about Democrats. They're actually doing it to us too. They are using information to deceive us. And that's exactly what happened in 2022. There was fraud in the 2022 election. There's fraud in every election. But the far greater cause of the red wave of 2022 becoming a red trickle and the hugely disappointing outcomes of the 22 election, the biggest cause by far was people not going out to vote because they believed in the machine fraud psyop that it was all rigged. So what's the point of even voting?
Hmm.
That was the biggest impact. That was the biggest cause of the red wave becoming the red trickle, was
Hmm.
Republicans just not getting out to vote.
Hmm. That's
And
concerning. Yeah.
And the reason is because people believed they took on and believed things that as factual. And I voted in 22, but I believed a lot of these things too. And so you believe these things, you take on a fact, that something that you think is a fact, and you accept that, then you, without even thinking about it, you build your whole worldview on those things that you accept as true. And so, we have to be extremely careful about what we accept as true, and we have to examine our assumptions. If we're unwilling to examine our assumptions, if we are unable, psychologically unable to accurately describe an opposing point of view that opposes what we believe, if we're unable to accurately describe that and consider the actual why somebody might believe that, then we're probably brainwashed.
Yeah, that's
And
exactly it. You're not willing to be intellectually honest, and if you're not, that's a
right,
sign that you've been brainwashed, essentially.
exactly.
Yeah. Listen, we have a couple questions here. I'd like for you to take these. I know we're wrapping up
Go
here
for
in
it.
time, but Cameron's going to bring up a question. I think we have two or three here that people want to ask you, I believe. Arlene, I am confused over the disapproval of Flynn by your guest. I consider Flynn unjustly harmed by Pence and Trump's quick dismissal of him due to unfair protocol in the FBI's interview of him. And I know Arlene, and I do, to be honest with you, Scott, I understand where Arlene is coming from. How would you respond to Arlene?
You know, yeah. So there is a great book, and I have it here. It's "War by Other Means" by General Kellogg, and Kellogg was actually the very first person to see Flynn after that interview with the FBI, and he describes it in that book. He has a chapter in that book where he talks um, about Flynn specifically. And so he watched Flynn as he was walking, opening the door and walking out of that meeting. He happened to be in the hall right there. So he was the very first person to see Flynn. And what he described, and I don't remember his exact words, but what he described there was something seriously wrong. He knew that there was something seriously wrong, not just what had been done to him, but what he had willingly done. He had the impression that he had just witnessed someone doing something that he knew was wrong. And and I think that book is definitely worth taking a look at. But if you look at, it, he lied to Pence. So Flynn lied to Pence. He told Pence that he did not talk to the Russian ambassador. He told him that he talked about something completely different. Pence went public with that. It was Flynn that harmed Pence. Now, I don't defend Pence. I think Pence did a lot of harm. I think that he was actually a plant within Trump's administration by the Koch brothers who wanted to destroy Trump.
Yeah.
So I have no love, for Pence, but just looking at it objectively, Flynn did more harm to Mike Pence than Mike Pence did to Flynn.
Very
Uh, you know,
interesting.
by 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 giving
Yeah.
him information that he knew was false. He
Yeah.
knew was false, and Pence went to the media with that, and that had a serious material impact on Pence's credibility going forward.
Yeah. Arlene, thank you for that question. Let's get another one up here, Cameron, from somebody else. It is Orlando Hodges. Thank you, Scott and Tom, for connecting the dots between public Flynn persona and this pseudo Flynn turncoat. How did Flynn perpetuate the Republican state parties with this 501c4?
Yeah.
How do you answer
So
that?
yeah, they gave money, money
Hmm.
and training, and so they actually provided military intelligence style training to the lieutenants within the organizations and state parties. And so my very first report was about a gentleman named Mike Labadie here in Michigan, who was a shadow operator behind Christina Caramo.
Yeah.
And I showed his voter registration from when he registered as a Democrat in California weeks before the 2016 election, and it was less than 6 months after that he was in Michigan, getting involved in the Republican Party, speaking far right Christian nationalist MAGAese, and talking about how he wanted to take over the party and save the country by getting rid of all the globalists. and
Hmm.
and he became a using and he has self-professed ties to the intelligence community. He told many people that, and and I had 5 named whistleblowers in that first report that had extensive direct experience with Mike Labadie and Christina Caramo, showing how he had gained psychological control over her, took over, ran a long-term 7-year operation to take over the state Republican Party and destroy it. He was in control of all of the decisions that were made under Christina Caramo's tenure, which completely destroyed the Republican Party. And had she not been removed and Pete Hoekstra put in place, it one of the things I reported on is Trump was actually planning on sending all of the money from his campaign to Illinois to to do their Michigan operations rather than through the Michigan State Party had Christina Caramo not been removed.
Yeah. Donald
It
Trump
was that bad.
came around initially supporting Christina Caramo, but obviously he put his name and support behind Pete Hoekstra because the party, as you say, was just being destroyed in the state
Yeah,
of Michigan. I want to get to our next question here real quick. We only have a few, maybe a couple minutes left here with Scott
sure.
McMahon. Let's bring it up, Cameron. We have another question. This one is from Ferris Happenings. So Flynn's phone call to the ambassador was legitimate. It's what he did on the phone call and the fact that he did not share that with the president that got him in trouble. Is that what you're
Um,
saying, Scott?
yeah, I mean, so there's not necessarily anything wrong with having a friendly conversation with a foreign dignitary as part of the transition, but it was that he was so. Uh, Obama had put sanctions on Russia, and what he was trying to do was, he was trying to negotiate with a foreign power that was hostile to the United States. He was trying to negotiate with them, trying to smooth it over, engage in diplomacy with them, and even counteract what Obama was doing. And
Hmm.
it could you could argue that there was nothing necessarily wrong with what he did, except that it was illegal. And
Hmm.
it's kind of like, it was and it was enough to put some serious shade on him. And there's more than that too. Flynn also set up the meetings with Don Jr. and Eric Trump with the Russians, so that
Yes, right.
they
In Trump
met with
Tower, is
Russians,
that what you're talking
and
about?
he, and from what I understand, that's right. And from what I understand, he actually encouraged them not to bring legal counsel with them. He
Hmm.
said, "Oh, it's not going to be a big deal. Just, they just want to get to know you." But then they tried to get them to agree to a quid pro quo, which fortunately they refused. But they didn't have counsel at those meetings.
Yeah, that's dangerous.
And
I
from what
gotta
I
bring this
understand,
up
that's
too,
largely
because
because of Flint.
yeah. So Flynn, you're saying that Flynn did that. John Kerry, remember him, Secretary of State at one point. He during Donald Trump's administration, he started negotiating with Iran, if I remember correctly, and undermining Donald Trump's effort to get out of that nuclear deal and all these different things happening with the country of Iran. John Kerry, representing the United States, no longer in office, goes to them and starts to try to negotiate a deal undermining Donald Trump. And that would be illegal as well, but nothing happened to that guy as would be
Mhm.
expected. That seems to be the case here. And something did happen to Michael
Right.
Flynn. So I know he never went to jail, but he had to fight that and he lost at that time at least. I don't know. It's very, very interesting what you're putting out there, and you've done your due diligence. So I would recommend people go to your website, biggertruthmedia.com. I got that right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah,
Biggertruthmedia.com.
biggertruthmedia.com. It's fascinating. I like you. I think you're a guy that is, you're a sophisticated individual. You're actually after the truth in the heart of the matter. And I think the more you investigate and research, which we all should do, none of us have that much time to do it. You're sacrificing in order to get to the truth, and I respect you for doing that. And I don't know all of it well enough yet. I'm going through your stuff. I'm still undecided on some of these things, but I tell you this: I've seen enough myself to not trust pretty much anybody in the political realm because there's always seemingly this ulterior motive that exists. Even with some people that you trust in politics, they might have some,
Sure.
disingenuous motives and attempts in their own career or whatever, selfish ambition, or a hold on power, pretending that they're
Yep.
someone who they're not. And to me, that is a disqualifier. So I appreciate you
Yep.
very much for coming on the program and talking about this. Again, I encourage people to go to Scott McMahon's website, biggertruthmedia.com. He's got video content up there. He's got speeches, and he's got a lot that he's written as well. Scott, I appreciate you. We'll catch up again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. Really appreciate it.
You're right. God bless you. Have a good day,
Yeah,
and,
God bless
and
you.
make sure you vote.
Yes, absolutely. Vote,
Yeah.
vote, vote. Stand in line, no matter how long it takes. Stand in line. Do not leave the line.
Right, absolutely. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. And that is important for our viewers here to understand. Listen, I know a lot of people are saying, well, more than half the country now has probably voted, and maybe it's you're thinking there's not totally secure. Donald Trump, and I agree with this, and Scott said the same thing. Flood the vote. Make sure it's too big to be rigged. And then you'll be okay. Hopefully that's the case. Although right now the polls are very, very, very tight as we're heading into the election day tomorrow. So tight between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. All right, it is surprisingly November already. So, yeah, election day is tomorrow. But end of the year also means a lot of people are getting surgery. Did you know that? Why now? Why the end of the year to wait to get surgery? Well, because deductibles are all paid up for the year, and now people want to make sure that their insurance will cover the costs of whatever it is they're going to go after. So I spoke with Dr. Matthew Cade. He's with Advanced Orthopedic Specialist about the options now for orthopedic types of surgery, or just some radical leaps forward in technology and some of the treatments that are available. Here's Dr. Matthew Cade. All right, the deal is that outpatient hip and knee replacements are really reshaping the landscape of orthopedic care in a very big way. Faster recovery times, that's a huge deal. There's a reduced need for lengthy hospital stays. We got all these advancements in surgical techniques, which are amazing, making it much easier for the patients who need these type of treatments. Let's go to Dr. Matthew Cade, Advanced Orthopedic Specialist. Doctor, it's good to have you back.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Fantastic. And it sounds like you're doing well also because of these advancements in these surgical techniques. When you think about hip replacements, knee replacements, you often think these are major surgeries, which necessarily means it's going to be a longer, recovery time as well. But that's not necessarily the case anymore, is it?
They are major surgeries, but people recover really fast. And over the decades that we've been doing them, we've had a lot of advances in technique and pain control and things like that. So now, people are doing therapy within an hour or two and going home within anywhere from 3 to 5 hours, depending on the patient. So
that's remarkable. They go back home that quickly. So the joint replacements, we're talking about knee and hip, allowing patients to go home that fast. Obviously the benefits are seemingly obvious to me, but on the long-term road of recovery, is that also translating to, it's weeks versus months or that kind of thing?
Yeah, it speeds up the recovery. People are more comfortable. They're home, sleeping in their own bed. Being out of the hospital is fantastic. Being away from germs and people who are sick is always a good thing. And, we have home health care nurses that'll come to your house and do some therapy with you. So it's just a much better way to do it. In the past, if you had a hip replacement 30 years ago, you were in the hospital for almost a week sometimes, which is honestly ridiculous for an elective procedure that we've really been able to, improve.
Well, that's the thing. So we're talking outpatient here, which, as you said, 30 years ago wasn't even a possibility. So you got to look at the broader, issue of healthcare in general. Does that help the industry? In terms of reducing costs? There's more beds available, that kind of thing?
It really does, yeah. Medicare, they love it because people are home. It saves, the burden, the healthcare cost burden is ridiculous in this country. And anything we can do to, maintain good care, but also save money is fantastic because, a lot of this is coming from, publicly funded, funds and Medicare. So it helps the whole country if we can, make it a little cheaper.
Right. Taxpayers are funding, of course. Those are the Medicare dollars that are going into this. All right. So that's hip and knee, those kinds of things. Broken bones, that's very common as well. Broken arm, broken leg, whatever it is. How is the technology translated to those types of situations, not just knees and hips, but fixing the broken forearm when you fall off a fence.
Yeah, bones take about 6 weeks to heal, and depending how bad it is, sometimes we have to do surgery. So, we have these minimally invasive small plates that we use now. You don't need a big, huge incision. So if you break your wrist, we do a small incision here. We can slide that plate on and make your fracture stable, and then it'll heal faster, and then your range of motion is better. So
Yeah. But there's always pain involved, and I know that's something that you have to pay attention to when you're dealing with patients. You break a bone, it's not going to necessarily feel pretty good. So, but these new techniques, do they allow for maybe less medication when you're prescribing that? I mean, if the recovery is faster, you would think there's less pain involved down the road.
Yeah, sometimes the anesthesiologist will actually do a nerve block from up top, and that helps a great deal for pain, especially in the immediate post-op period. And then we can do anti-inflammatories. There's some different medicines for nerve pain. We do like a low-dose opioid if you need it. But I think my fracture patients do pretty good. Within about a week or so, they're feeling pretty good. So.
Does that impact? I mean, I would imagine it does. I mean, it seems like an obvious question, but maybe you can expound on it a bit. The going back to your normal routine after you've broken your leg. Oftentimes people are out for a month or so, and instead of going back to the office, or maybe they're doing other types of physical labor. This, I'm sure, would get them back into the workforce more speedily.
Yeah, it really depends on which bone and where it is. So if it's a fracture of the knee joint, so where the two bones articulate, that's a much worse fracture that takes, that almost always needs surgery. But if, let's say, it's middle of the bone, like Aiden Hutchinson from the Lions, that's honestly a good place to break your bone. It doesn't articulate with anything. That will have good primary bone healing. So it depends on where it is, but yeah, hopefully, you're getting back to aggressive activity in anywhere from 2 to 5 months.
When you saw that injury, Aiden Hutchinson, what were your thoughts as an orthopedic surgeon?
I was thinking that his bone is going to be the hardest, densest, athlete bone. So the amount of force it took to break his tibial shaft must have been crazy. That was my first thought. And then I thought, oh, that's probably mid shaft. He's probably going to do great, honestly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because there's a lot of comparisons to Joe Theismann way back in the day that ended his career, and my wife and I were watching that thing, and this doesn't look good. But we're lay people.
Yeah.
You have the expertise in this, and you mentioned something that is, I don't know if it's well known or not, but the athlete's bone, it's not just muscle in tissue, but the bone itself is denser. It's stronger because. Well, explain why that happens. I know weightlifting is good for your bone structure, and why is that the case?
When you stress a bone, it remodels itself and it stimulates itself to build more bone, more dense bone to make it stronger. So people who are constantly stressing their bones like that, especially young, healthy people, their bone gets extremely strong. If you've ever seen like an MMA fighter, they stress their tibia by kicking bags for years and years. So their tibias are so strong. They can even break baseball bats with them.
You're kidding me. All right. So what does that tell you when you're interacting with patients who are maybe advanced in years, and in terms of some of their physical routine, their exercise? Should they include weight-bearing type of exercises to strengthen the bones?
Exercise, weight-bearing, walking, elliptical, swimming, anything that puts a healthy amount of stress on the bone for it to continue to remodel itself is fantastic.
Healthy amount of stress. So that obviously depends on the patient, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, and that's why we see all these fractures in people who are in their 70s and 80s is because osteoporosis has set in. They're a little more sedentary. They're not remodeling their bone, and then they fall. And if you or I fell in this room, we wouldn't break our hip. A fall from a standing height, but someone in their 80s, they would.
And you hear that a lot, and it's always concerning. I've known a lot of elderly people who have fallen, and it's not been a good situation. But depending, of course, how well they've taken their care of themselves, and weight-bearing exercise is a big part of that. All right. Well, it's fantastic talking to you. I'm really encouraged by the advancements in treatments because most of us have broken bones in our past, and the fact that we've come such a long way in this is really, really neat, really encouraging. Your website again, how can people get a hold of you?
Advancedortho.net, and then Facebook, Instagram, I'm on there.
Yeah, you're all over the place. I see you all the time. Dr. Matthew Cade, what a privilege. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Yeah, good guy. Get out there and strengthen your bones and do some weight bearing exercises. Don't do what I'm doing all day, sitting. Go out and do something. All right, got a couple minutes here. Time to take some questions and comments. Let's bring them up one by one, as long as we have time. The engineer is back with us. Hey, the engineer. Kamala's campaign has pulled their money out of North Carolina and Nevada. They are putting the money to defend Virginia. Follow the money, not the rhetoric. That's very key. I like where you're going on this because I do think, North Carolina, I don't know if that's going to go in Kamala's column or not. Nevada, I'm more concerned about, but Virginia, she wants to win. That is a must win. Virginia, Pennsylvania too, I think would be, and then the state of Michigan too. The engineer, always good to hear from you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Let's bring up another one here. It is Christopher Garcia, supermajority Democrat. California usually cancels out my vote, but that won't stop me from voting the correct way. Vote common sense. Vote Republican. Christopher Garcia. Love this guy, by the way. You're absolutely right. I lived, as you know, out in California for decades. And as an adult, I would still vote, even though I know it's a supermajority Democrat, and it's probably going to cancel out. Oftentimes, it was frustrating watching the national elections on the west side of the country. By the time you voted, the election was over. Like the networks would already call it for whoever, and it's like, I'm still going to go out and vote because sometimes you vote after work, but you want to get it out there. And I think it's important to understand because there are cases where that your vote's going to, even if you're in that supermajority Democrat. I appreciate and respect you. Christopher Garcia, thank you so much. Time for one more. Let's bring it up, and then we'll have to say farewell and adieu. This will be from Vaughn Westerby. Hey, Vaughn. Tom, you mentioned Nolan Finley in your conversation. I'm wondering where he is coming from, in your opinion, because it's obvious he is definitely not a Trump supporter. Your thoughts? Yeah, he's not. He does not like Donald Trump, and that's why the Detroit News did not endorse Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. He doesn't like Kamala Harris either. And on this point, Nolan Finley and I would disagree because I think that Donald Trump, and listen, he readily admits that it's not his policies that he disagrees with. In fact, Nolan Finley will say that he mostly agrees with Donald Trump's policies. He just doesn't believe that Trump has the character to lead the country. And then I would say, well, does Kamala Harris have the character and the moral, supremacy in this? Not at all. Neither did Joe Biden. And so my view on this is that, everyone's flawed. Character flaws exist amongst everybody, including maybe even more so politicians. And yeah, he's arrogant, but he's also someone, in my view, who cares much more about the little guy like me than the Democrats do. And I'll give you just one general example. Democrats always talk about unity. What they mean by unity is do what we say, or else we're going to discard you and get you out of. We're going to kick you out. Follow the partisan line, or you're gone. And I could cite example after example how that's happened to Democrats, and they know that if they speak out in certain aspects of, like defending, the 24-hour waiting period for abortions or informed consent, if they say that publicly, they're gone. So that's what they mean by unity. Do what we say, or you're out. So we all look like we're all following the same thing. And they are. It's an ideology. Republicans, when they talk about unity, they are united around the principles of this country, which means argumentation. You can disagree on things, and let's eventually get to the best outcome by allowing, it's a big tent. Get all these ideas together. Let's go at it. Let's argue on the House floor, on the Senate floor. Let's really, fight for our case without fearing that we're going to be shunned and ousted from the party. And then you come to an agreement, and in that end agreement, you unify. Okay, we all had our say on this. You know how I feel about it, but this is what we all decided, so let's stick with that. That's unity. United around the principles of the United States, not around an authoritarian regime that mandates that you do something. And to me, that is a huge, huge issue. So I think that in this case, I would absolutely say you got to vote for Donald Trump in this, regardless if you don't like his personality or even his character. His policies are found in alignment with the foundation of this country. And I would argue Kamala Harris, her policies are opposed to the foundational values of the United States of America. So I would disagree with Nolan Finley. I think that he should have endorsed Donald Trump. But that being said, he is fully aware of the shenanigans of the Democratic Party and what they're doing right now. They're the reason why so many people now do not believe in the integrity of the electoral process. You should read his column. It's a good one in the Detroit News. He's absolutely right. What the Democrats have done, particularly in his state of Michigan, is they've gotten rid of all the safeguards, and they want to get rid of more of them. So it's not quite all just yet, but almost there, so that anybody can vote at any time and will never know who they are. If they cheated or not, their vote is still going to count, because we've made it in Michigan that you cannot match the ballot that was cast with an individual who may have not been a legal citizen of this country. We just saw that the other day. The reason why his vote will still count is because we can't find it. He already cast it. We know he's guilty, but his vote is still going to count. A non-citizen in this country. That's what the Democrats are doing. So I'm like, you got to vote in this case with conservative values, or else you don't really necessarily care about the country, in my opinion. Vaughn, thanks for that question. I appreciate it. That's going to do it for us. Big day tomorrow. It is Election Day. We'll have our normal broadcast, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, Tom Jordan Live on YouTube, X, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And then we're going to have a special tomorrow night, 8 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, watching all the returns come in across the country. A lot of special guests will be joining me for that special edition of Tom Jordan Live tomorrow night, election night, 8 p.m. to midnight. God bless you. Thanks. We'll talk again very soon.